The New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society is pleased to present this recording from January 25th, 2023. Our topic is that bane of all authors, marketing. In this case, marketing historical fiction. Our panelists are Karen A. Chase, Lars D.H. Hedbor, and Kris Waldherr. Our hosts are steering committee members Julieta Rodrigues, who serves in member outreach, and Lisa Yarde, who manages chapter programming. Information about our chapter and its leadership is available at our website, link listed in the comments. Thank you, and enjoy the program.
Good evening. I am your moderator, Lisa Yarde. I'm here with my co-moderator, Julieta Rodrigues, and I want to welcome you all to this session. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce each of our presenters, reading a brief bit from their biographies, and then I will turn it over to Julieta, who will ask the first question to kick off our discussion. So our first presenter is Karen A. Chase, an author, speaker, and brand designer. For nearly 3 decades, Karen has worked as a professional designer, creating brands for national and international organizations, nonprofits, and authors. In addition to 2 decades running her own freelance business, she launched 224 Pages, her own publishing house, in 2011. She has spoken with nearly 100 historical, corporate, and trade audiences in the US and Canada. Next, I'll introduce Lars D.H. Hedbor. With 15 novels set in the era, he is a leading novelist of the American Revolution, and he specializes in telling the stories of ordinary people across many of the less explored locales and events of that well-known history. He has also written extensively for nonfiction journals and has had appearances on national television as an expert on the Revolution. Our last presenter, Kris Waldherr, writes books that explore the hidden stories of women's lives. Her newest novel is Unnatural Creatures, a sweeping reimagining of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, told through the eyes of the 3 women closest to Victor Frankenstein. Unnatural Creatures was named an editor's choice by the Historical Novels Review, who praised it as a splendid achievement from a writer at the height of her powers. It was also chosen as a favorite book of the year by the Washington Independent Review of Books. Now I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator, Julieta. Please, Julieta, you have the first question.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and seeing you all, and I'm delighted to be moderating with Lisa Yarde. All right, the first question goes to you, Karen. I loved hearing you for the first time in 2019 at the workshop of the Historical Novel Society in Maryland, and it was like a world opening to me. So it was a very important workshop for me, and I am sure you have a lot to share with everyone here this evening. So I loved your book, Brand the Author, Not the Book. And there is a lot of enthusiasm and there is a lot of joy in all that you say there. Mm-hmm. So my first question to you is, describe for us that branding issue that seems so important to you. Be unique, be consistent, authentic. Give us a couple of examples if you can.
Right. So when we as authors, especially in the Historical Novel Society, we're all writing historical fiction. And even though, for instance, Lars and I both write Revolutionary War fiction, we are very different authors in the way that we approach things. Certainly, Lars, with his depth of novels, all talking about different colonies or states being involved in the revolution, he has a very specific line that he runs in with his fiction. And, I'm talking about historical documents and the signing of those documents. So even though we're in the same time period, we're very different. And that type of distinction is really important when it comes to an author brand. Yes, I want people who read me to also read Lars, but at the same time, I I want them to come back to me for certain things. And that's what branding is about. It's really about defining who you are that makes you unique, makes you different, and something that you can hang your hat on consistently, from your website to your little business card you hand out somewhere to the newsletter. That's having a brand that defines the colors and the fonts and the messaging and all of that, that makes people recognize you outside of just having read a book. Coca-Cola does it well, right? Like when you envision Coca-Cola, you envision the logo, you envision the bottle shape, you envision the polar bears at Christmas time. But that all together invokes a mood and a feeling for you, and that's what author branding is too.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I have the next question, Karen. You talk about growing your readers book by book. What is the best way in which you can advise our audience on how specifically to do that?
To grow your readership? Is that the question? I'm sorry, you broke up a bit there.
Oh, sorry. The question was growing your readers book by book. How would you specifically suggest that our audience go about doing that?
The most important thing I can suggest to especially new authors, and this applies to even authors that are 3 or 4 books in, is, do you have a newsletter where people sign up and give you their email address? Because all those people that read Carrying Independence, my first novel, back there it is, I want to make sure that when I launch the second book, that they come along for the ride on the second book. I worked with an author developing her brand, and she had 100,000 readers on her first book of historical fiction, and she had no newsletter following. So when her second book came out from her publisher, she was starting all over again to try and get those readers to come along. Had she had that newsletter from the beginning, even if only a 10th of those people had signed up, a 10th of those people would have known about her first novel or her second novel from her. So the newsletter, I talk about the marketing funnel. You want people to find you and drop down in through all the pieces of marketing materials you have. The newsletter is at the bottom of that funnel so that they sign up for that and they get information directly from you going forward. So that's my big tip. Make a newsletter. Doesn't have to be that you put it out every month. You just have to have a consistent communication with your followers. But that's my big advice.
Yeah,
if I can jump in on that, I just wanted to jump in on that and say a lot of authors spend a lot of time building up followership on social media, and that's great, but it can go away. Either the social media channel can be affected by events outside our control, or your account can be affected by events outside your control. The newsletter you own.
Very smart. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Lars, I wanted to go back to this question that Karen is mentioning. In your Tales from the Revolution series, what defines your brand? Could you give us some specifics that you use for marketing? Because when I look at your website, I see it is so well organized in terms of the audience, the sales, the marketing. I was in awe when I looked at it, because I see you as one who is very concerned with sales and marketing. So how do you define your brand in your series?
No, I appreciate that feedback, because like anybody, I suffer from imposter syndrome, especially around my website. So my brand, as Karen alluded to briefly, I really specialize in telling those stories that haven't necessarily made it into the history books, or haven't bubbled up to the top of the consciousness of when we think about the American Revolution. And I I'm working on writing one novel for each of the colonies as well as some of the future states. So geographically, I'm getting out to where a lot of people live and where they, may not be aware that there was Revolutionary War history happening. So, my branding is around making sure that people understand, number one, I'm writing about the American Revolution. I'm not writing about the Civil War. I'm not writing about World War II. So, I'm using fonts and graphics that are specific to my era. I have my covers designed so that they also attempt to evoke a common theme, of the era. My graphics on my website are consistent with my covers and with the rest of my branding graphics. I did not have the benefit of Karen's book when I set out to do this stuff. And I really wish that I had, because it would have made it a lot more organized than it is. And in fact, I've actually, Karen has an exercise early on in her workbook where she has you set up a folder, a folder structure to have all of your branding elements in it. And I've gone through that exercise now because it helps me when I'm putting together new collateral and so forth to be able to say, this is where I can find all that stuff instead of having to search through, 100 different directories.
Actually, I had that question for you exactly. How did you decide on that marketing strategy? Was this decided from the beginning that you do that series Tales from the Revolution, or it came about as you went along?
So I initially started writing in the Revolution in response to a friend who grew up in the Carolinas and was telling me about all this amazing stuff that happened in the Revolution there. I was like, wow, I've never heard about the South in the Revolution. All you hear about there is the Civil War. And so actually from the very first book, I kind of already had this vision of, I think I want to find these stories to tell from each of the different places to make sure that everybody understands that the Revolution was local to them as well. So that was sort of a founding vision of the series, and I didn't really stumble into it so much as just kind of said, this seems like it's a niche that I can fill and have a lot of fun doing it for a lot of years.
Fun.
Excellent. Lars, I wanted to ask you, how has the advent and the real growth of the audiobook industry, has that impacted how you market your books today?
So I have audiobooks of all of my titles. I was very fortunate. I found an absolutely spectacular narrator who has produced almost all of my audiobooks for me. I have one that's told from the point of view of a young woman in Canada, and he's got a great big deep baritone voice, and I thought asking him to do a whole audiobook in falsetto was kind of unfair. But everything else he's done for me. And as for marketing the audiobooks, I will confess that I have not experienced great success with that. I continue to work on that. That's an area of focus for me actually this year. And with the development yesterday, where Audible single-handedly decided to reprice everything, that suddenly got a lot more interesting and exciting for me. My first reaction to that news was, oh my God, the sky is falling. Nobody's ever going to buy another thing from me on credits again, because my books tend to be kind of short. They're about 5 hours in audio. And then I went back and I looked at my statistics, and my overall sales are probably 3/4, 2/3 people buying cash, buying my books in cash. And now they just got dropped in price, which means I suddenly have an opportunity to say, hey, you're buying them for cash anyway, and now they're half as expensive as they were. So I have some opportunities there to go out to my readership and to try to find a new readership that is the audiobook focused readership, because they're not the same. That's one of those key things, is that you think, oh, I'll just send something to my newsletter. Well, your newsletter, in my case, is made up of people who bought you in paperback or hardback or ebook. And they're not necessarily the audiobook readers. I did a survey last month of my readers and asked them, how do you prefer to read books of this kind? And the most popular format was paperback. Second most popular was hardcover, then ebook, and audio at the very tail of that. And again, that's a function of who my readership is on my newsletter. But that does tell me that I've got some work to do to attract some of those audiobooks.
Understood.
Turning to Kris now, we would like to ask you basically the same question. You are slightly different because you are an artist and a writer. And so how do you combine both when you are doing marketing? Do you ever combine them or you do them separately? How do you do your branding? It's basically what the question is.
Well, I also just wanted to hop onto something that Lars had said about audiobook marketing. And I just put out my first audiobook. I have an interesting pedigree in that I spent the majority of my publishing career, and I've been published since 1988, right out of art school, being traditionally published. So it's only recently, the last 6 months, that I hopped over to self-publishing with my first book, being self-published, being Unnatural Creatures, which here it is. Ta-da! But I also found it's difficult and very tricky to market for audiobooks. And I think I have noticed that marketing wide makes it a lot easier, quote unquote easy. I wouldn't say that it's easy, because Audible is really a conundrum. And I also found that marketing to libraries really helps a lot too. I've noticed a good portion of my audiobook sales are to libraries, which I think it helps that my audiobook, it was named a audiophile book of the month or whatever. So that helped a lot that it did get that kind of attention. But back to Juliet's question, which is great. Yes, I'm an artist and I'm also a writer. And I combine them both together because I think my branding is very much about the design of my work. Like when you come to my website, there's an aesthetic experience that's pretty consistent. And part of that was I did speak to a branding person. I was lucky I have a good friend who does that, Karen Smiling. And she helped me figure out how to kind of bring it all together. And she had said, the one thing I noticed about you is that your brand is very much about beauty. It's a certain aesthetic. And it's also about marketing to women and women's stories, as well as it's about storytelling in general. Besides writing novels, I also have created some nonfiction books. One is called The Book of Goddesses, which became a tarot deck, which sold 250,000 copies, which astonished me. I had no idea. It just sort of took off. So there's a number of different things that I was trying to bring together in this fold, so to speak. So that's kind of where I'm at, was that using my ability as an artist, as a designer, to create this aesthetic experience that when people come to my website or with my books or my tarot decks or whatever, it's something that they know that it's me, it's Kris Waldherr. It's, stories of women's, and as well as beautifully put together, I hope. I mean, that's my intention. Like I designed my covers. And interestingly, even in my traditionally published books, those also had my covers designed by me for the most part. The publisher would hire me and pay me to design the covers because that's my background as a designer. So
very nice.
Yeah, so aesthetics is so important. I mean, I think that one of the things that undermines a lot of self-published authors is I understand people are in budgets, please spend money to get a professionally designed book. It makes a huge difference.
Kris, I wanted to ask you two questions. I'm going to cheat a little bit here.
Okay.
So the question is, because I know quite a bit about how you've worked as a hybrid author, can you tell us how marketing has been different for you, how aspects of marketing have changed for you when you were, say, strictly a traditionally published author versus getting into your own publishing? How has that changed your approach to marketing?
That is a great question. Well, the one thing I can say is, as an author, whether you're traditionally published or self-published, you got to work. And I've noticed when I was first published in 1988, I basically did nothing. It was very nice. very, very different. Like maybe I've had some bookmarks printed up or something. I went to a few libraries, did a few appearances. It's changed so much over the years that now it really is expected that the author, whether you're traditionally published or self-published or hybrid, you have to do the vast bulk of the marketing yourself, unless you're one of what my friends and I like to jokingly say, like the chosen few, that maybe your publisher acquired you at auction at a 6 or 7 figure auction or whatever. And they're going to put a lot of money into the marketing, but most of the time they're not. You know, they'll buy your book for maybe like a mid 5-figure advance, and they'll like give you, like, you'll get a Goodreads giveaway, you'll get a you know, a NetGalley, eArcs are up, that sort of thing. However, the good news is that if you're hybrid or self-published, you can do that yourself. And I did that. I basically approached the marketing of Unnatural Creatures as if I was a traditional publisher. I did register myself as an LLC and all of that. Like, I paid for a NetGalley, and that really, really helped a lot. I paid for those Goodreads giveaway, and that helped a lot too, because what you want is as many reviews as possible to give your book legitimacy. I pay to have print ARCs, which I sent. ARCs are advanced reader copies, which I sent out to review all sorts of places, like whether it be, you mentioned the Washington Independent Review of Books. I sent them out to, for example, Crime Reads, which also named the book as like a most anticipated book for the fall. I basically acted as though I am an imprint of whatever house you can imagine, and I'm going to act as professionally as possible, which of course takes a lot of work and costs money. And I think that made a big difference, because I noticed that the reviews that I got in, it was like I was a traditionally published author, but I have that advantage of years of working in that front, as well as working at a big 5 publisher as a book designer. So I know that, you know, there's something to be said for having that experience.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
very nice.
wonderful.
Which brings us to this issue of author as entrepreneur that Karen so much describes. Could we go a little bit into that, Karen?
Sure. You know, listening to Lars and Kris both talk about this, I mean, we spend a large portion of our time marketing the books outside of actually writing them. And
Yes.
that
Wow.
it doesn't matter if you're traditionally published or not, you're going to have to spend a huge chunk of time managing the business of marketing and selling that book, whether it's direct to readers or you know, online or things like that. And certainly you're going to be investing in marketing that you can't do yourself. Right now, for my Brand the Author book, I'm running a marketing campaign across Facebook and Instagram and Amazon, and I'm doing PR outreach and everything for it. And I am paying an outside group to do it with me, because you know, there are certain aspects of running a business that you are well suited to do on your own. Amazon ads is not one of those for me. Having a list of things that you know you do well and a list of things you can't. I can design a book cover. I've been a designer for 25 years. You know, I can design a Facebook ad, but I cannot run Amazon ads, and nor do I want to. That to me just seems
Yes.
like a time suck that I don't want to go into, you know? And I know it's really important in terms of advancing book sales. So you have to weigh what you can do against what you like to do.
Yes.
And then decide where your hours are going to be spent on the business side of things. But it is a business. It doesn't matter whether you're traditionally published or not. Like Kris said, the chosen few, the Dan Browns and the people that get those 7 or 8 figure deals or things like that, or 6 figure deals even, they're going to have a lot more marketing weight behind them with a publisher. But you know, by and large, the average advance now from a publisher is $5,000. You know, you'll be lucky to get 10 at this point. And you'll be lucky to know whether or not that advance is spread out over 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 payments. Some publishers are not even paying that last advance installment until after the book goes to hardcover, of all things. So You know, you really have to understand that marketing is going to be a part of the author life, and that means you're going to be running this as a business. And
Yeah.
if you really aren't prepared to run this as a business, I mean, I have a math compilation in my book regarding 112 hours. You know, when you take out during the week what you have to do in terms of sleep, you have 112 waking hours. And if you go through the math and you've got a full-time job and you've got kids and family and soccer practice and a bunch of other things, what hours do you have left? And if those hours out of 112 are about 2 or 3, maybe just writing, just to have the joy of writing is what you want to do right now. But if you have more hours than that you can dedicate to both writing and marketing and the business side of things, then that's it may be a pursuit worth going after for you. But the realities are it is having to operate as a business because the publishers are not looking out for us. I mean, Simon and Schuster right now, you know, a very dear friend in the publishing industry said that Simon and Schuster, when I talked with her last week, she said Simon and Schuster is known for doing magic math so that their authors don't end up with royalties. Well,
Yeah.
if it's not an income you're going to be getting from the publisher, you need to find it in other ways. And that means selling direct to readers. And if you don't have the time, capacity, chutzpah, gumption, whatever you want to call it, to be able to do that, it's going to be a really painful endeavor. So you want to find the joy in it. You want to be able to embrace this as a business and something you love. And if that side of it's going to be awful for you, it's okay to say not yet. I'm not saying that you would say no now, but you would say not yet.
But you see, I find I don't know what other people feel, but I find it a very conflicting issue. I was reading Karen's book and I was looking at those charts and I was looking at the time spent on writing and when you go to launching the book and I was seeing the time increasing and, you know, now you can't write. And, you know, we basically do a labor of love, but I find this whole issue at the moment very conflicting, and I truly do not know how to go about it because of the time chart and how
I know.
much you have to spend doing things that I really personally do not want to do. I don't want to do them. So I don't know what the solution is.
I don't, you know, I have to say, I'm in marketing. I've been in marketing for 25 years. I love writing. I really do. But even on a daily basis, I'm conflicted. It gives me a stomach ache to think about all the business things I have to handle in order to make this writing thing go. And
I like to hear that.
Yeah,
I like to hear that because that's very much the way I feel. And I thought you felt differently. So for me, it's very good.
No, I do. You know, the book is almost a word of caution, but on a daily basis, if I had to admit it, I would say every day I wake up and say, what am I doing all this for? And, you know, and then you write a paragraph of, you know, fiction and you see your character come alive on the page and you fall in love with them all over again and you think that's what it's for. And that thing that the fictional character is imparting to the world is more important than whether or not you can run an Amazon ad.
See, for me, the marketing side of it almost becomes, I don't want to make light of it, but it becomes almost a game for me where I'm like, okay, if I can figure this piece out, I can get to the next stage of you know, okay, and I measure everything. I've got an Excel spreadsheet that makes my accountant wife a little bit intimidated, where I'm cross-referencing and measuring everything, and you know, so I keep score. You know, I go back and I say, okay, what's my return on ad spend this week? How does that compare to last week? How does it look for the quarter? And you know, as long as I see the results that I'm looking for there, as long as I'm seeing positive return on investment, then I know that I can keep on going with what I'm doing. Yeah. And when I see those metrics start to change, I try to take a very data-driven approach to making changes to my approach.
Lars is
And it-
terrific at that, I gotta say. Like, I think you have a really good mix of, right brain, left brain. You can separate the creative stuff that you do from the data business side of things, and that is not for everyone in publishing.
Yeah. Well, and there are times where I go back and I look at my books, I go, where did that come from? It's either it's terrible or it's brilliant, but where did that come from? And in my darker moments, I'm like, can I ever do that again?
And I just wanted to hop in onto something that Karen had mentioned about the right brain, left brain. Personally, I found that separating the two time-wise is the only way to do it, because I can't be doing both. Like, I may spend a week where all I do is the business, and then a week all I do is write, because I have to have that immersive, because my brain just doesn't like it. And I start to feel depressed. And there is a certain amount, as Lars said, it can be very playful doing the marketing. It can be very fun, like pulling one lever, seeing the response, pulling another lever and saying, well, that doesn't work, I'm going to take my money out there. But I also wanted to reiterate what Karen had said about, if you don't like doing something, hire people to help you. I had people helping me. As I'd like to say, it's not self-publishing, it's self-directed publishing. You're in charge. Get people who can do what you don't want to do.
That's perfect, Kris. That's a perfect description.
I want to jump in with a couple
Sorry,
of
go ahead, Lisa.
our audience, because we don't want to lose track of those. And presenters, feel free to jump in and answer these questions as they come up. So the first one is from Kirsten Marcel. She wants to know, how much direct marketing to or working with historical sites do you recommend? What advice do you have for approaching them?
I'd like to jump in on that one, because I've had a little bit of luck with a couple of different sites associated with a couple of my books. In particular, I had a book that is set in Connecticut at an abandoned copper mine that was used as a prison during the American Revolution. And one of the papers that I read as I was researching that was written by a young woman who I reached out to get some clarification on a question. And she was very knowledgeable. And so I asked her, would you be willing to read this book for me? It turns out, yes, she was willing to read the book, but also she's the director of the museum at that site today. Wow. So dumb luck, I ended up connecting with the director of this historic site. And she was very, very eager to have the book in stock. It actually invited me out to speak at the site, which, that worked out beautifully. I have reached out to other historical museums and so forth to see about having their gift shops carry me, and I've had mixed success at that. I tried to reach out to one that is doing exactly what I'm doing. They're focusing on the stories of ordinary people in the Revolution, and got shunted aside to a management company in California that is responsible for their gift shop. And the lady there was very, very biased against indie authors and really didn't want anything to do with me. So that was a struggle. On the other hand, I sent an email to them, but never really heard back. Another museum down in Yorktown, I got an order for, I want to say it was like 30 copies. And a friend, and I had no idea where the order had come from. It was through Ingram. And a friend a few weeks later sent me a picture, said, hey, they've got your book at the museum there. And I was like, whoa, that's awesome. So yes, absolutely, those historic sites can be terrific opportunities. And on my long list of things that I want to get to in the future is reaching out to more of those.
I will piggyback on what Lars is saying too. Like the gift shops for a lot of the museums and historic sites, they do go through typically bigger conglomerates, and so it is harder to sell to them. And when you sell a book through a gift shop, by the time they pay Ingram and the payment comes to you on a $20 book, you're probably getting $2 a book. My bigger success with my revolutionary novel has been working with the historic groups associated with the American Revolution. So a case in point for me, the Daughters of the American Revolution. I mean, they have chapters all over the country. There's 185,000 of them. And to date, I've spoken to about 2,500 DAR members. And when they buy a book from me, when I go give a talk, or even when I do one online and they buy direct from me, it's $10 a book. So you want to talk about the bigger return. Plus, I've just ingratiated myself with the DAR. I found out I was one, I became one, and that really helps a lot. But they have a lot of speakers. Libby McNamee is a woman who writes in our revolutionary period too, and she's not a DAR, and she's spoken at a ton of DAR events and made quite an impact. So if you're writing Tudor, for instance, or the Renaissance fairs is a good example. There are Renaissance groups, there are Regency groups, depending on what historical area you're in. There are a lot of nonprofits and trade groups and reenactor groups and people that just love contra dance who all come together. I mean, those types of groups, they're almost more beneficial than some of the gift shops. It's a lot less legwork. They refer to one another. Your chances of getting in front of them are greater. You can do it Zoom from home like this. They're much more beneficial for your time period, I think.
I wanted to ask Lars, what do you do in terms of advertising? You mentioned that you do quite a bit of that. How do you do that specifically?
So I do run Amazon ads, and their dashboard should not be trusted. If you're looking at their dashboard, it claims that you've sold so many dollars and whatnot. It has nothing to do with reality. So it looks like I'm not selling anything on through the Amazon ads, but if I turn them off, or like happened earlier this year, I forget to extend them, and they go away, I notice a dip in my sales. So it doesn't look like they're doing anything, but there's something happening there. Where I get most of my success, though, has been on Facebook. Facebook ads, number one, the demographic of Facebook users lines up very, very well with the demographic of historical fiction readers, and specifically my readers. It tends to skew a little bit older, for whatever reason, my readership tends to skew a little bit more towards women, typically 45 and up. And guess who's on Facebook? Women 45 and up. So targeting those people is very, very easy. The specific targeting of people who are interested in my area has become much harder over the last couple of years with political events, anything associated with the revolution. Even things like Sons of the American Revolution or Daughters of the American Revolution were taken away as targeting options for me on Facebook. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. But what I have had some success with is doing what Joanna Penn refers to as content marketing. And so what I've been doing for years on Twitter is every day I a tweet of here's what happened in the American Revolution on this date. And at the beginning of this year, with the events at Twitter, I shifted over to doing that on Facebook as well, which has had a really interesting knock-on effect, because those Facebook ads, those Facebook posts then get shared, comment on them, and they see their friends commenting on them. And all of a sudden, I've got people interacting with my page who never did before. And guess what? I'm targeting to people who have interacted with my page in the past, which means that they're now seeing my ads as well as seeing my content. So that is the synchronicity there I didn't see coming, and it's really working out very well for me.
Yeah, this is very interesting, because I always heard, I don't know about Amazon ads, but I always heard that the Facebook ads do not add up necessarily to sales. And so this that you are doing is kind of very interesting, that, you put, on that particular date, what happened with the American Revolution, which might have an effect on the Facebook ads.
Right.
I don't know.
And
I
will say that
it does.
Yeah, long term, you know, my statistics are that for every dollar I pump into advertising between Facebook and Amazon, I get about $1.40, $1.30 back, just
Ah.
reliably over time. So it's not
That's good.
explosive growth, but I'm gaining a readership of people who have never heard of me before, and I'm getting paid for it. So that's kind of
That's good.
the
Yes.
ideal.
Kris,
I just wanted to jump in and say I've had really good experiences with Facebook ads too. And Fanula Austin, who some of you may know, she works at Facebook and she talked me through it. They have an automatic, it's sort of like, I can't even explain it off the top of my head, but it's there on Facebook. And I would say it's more like mine has been, I've had a little bit of a higher return, but I did a lot of testing of different ads and stuff. And then I kept getting rid of the ones that didn't work. And so now it's pretty consistent. And I notice that when I turn them off, my sales definitely drop. So yeah, Facebook ads.
I'd say the same thing too with the historical fiction. It is, like
Yeah.
Lars said, it's the right audience. It's easier to target them by region too, which I know for Lars means a lot when you're coming out with a book about a specific region. But Facebook ads have done more for me than anything. And same thing, Kris. When I shut them off, I really see it in the sales.
Yep. Yeah, I would say I get about double back what I put in.
okay.
And
Kris,
there's a lot of good.
Sorry. I didn't
I-
want to lose sight of this. Kris, you've got an excellent question from Julia Sullivan. She wants to know, when you say market to libraries, can you explain to all of us what?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Well, I also wanted to go back to something Karen had said about seeing how much money you're making per book, because it's true. If you like, a lot of people get very obsessed with getting their books into bookstores, but between Ingram and stuff, if you make $2 a book, that's pretty good. And plus, you also have to deal with the conundrum of returns, which can really sink you. So I decided to focus mainly on marketing to libraries. Because there's only so much you could do. And also with libraries, you can set it up that you have no returns and you can have a lower discount, meaning it's 40% compared to 55%, which you have to do with marketing to bookstores and such. And what I did was I created a special library edition that was hardcover and with a beautiful wraparound cover and stuff. So that has been really successful. I was kind of shocked my book has only been out for 3 months, but I was kind of shocked to see that the proportions of library sales for that hardcover were nearly as half as for everything else. But when I say about marketing directly to libraries, there's twofold. First off, you have to have the reviews, and I mean reviews in trade magazines and such. So it helped that I got a great review in Forward magazine that I didn't pay for. And also, historical novel review certainly helps, and others as well. So I was really concentrated on getting those kind of reviews, but it helped that Unnatural Creatures is a more literary sort of novel. And I also made sure to get a lot of endorsements from authors that the librarians would recognize who were established. So that was one part of it. The second part was I did do a direct mailer, and I had a friend helping me. And if you've been published before, you can go into WorldCat and see where your book is located, where your previous books have been sold. So what you do is you write them a letter or an email or whatever and say, hey, my previous book, The Lost History of Dreams, is on your shelves. I have a new book coming out. Here's the information. Here's the NetGalley link if you want to download an advanced copy, or I can send you a paper arc. I was kind of careful about only sending my paper arcs for review because they get to be really expensive. But for others, like for bookstores and stuff, I would send them the NetGalley link. And I noticed that really helped a lot. The other thing to consider is that when you're selling electronic media to library, they pay more because it's more of a license. So you can charge more for the ebook and for the audiobook, which also helps a lot. So that's kind of what I decided to focus on. And so far, I mean, there's much more I need to do. It's only been 3 months out, but I've been really pleased with the response I've gotten from what energy I put into it.
Kris, are you in Biblio?
I don't know what Biblio is, so forgive me.
It's where books can access, or libraries can access your ebook.
I know that I'm in Overdrive. and others. And one thing is that there's another one. It'll come to me after we click off. It takes a really long time. Hoopla. It takes a long time to get listed on Hoopla. It takes many, many months. So I'm still waiting to get onto Hoopla. And I had submitted to Hoopla like about 6 months, I would say, before my pub date. But I've been told that it can take up to a year. But I am on Overdrive. I am on WorldCat and all of that. And I've been seeing it slowly populate because I know it's in certain libraries, but it's still not showing up in certain catalogs. But I know it's there because I can see that they bought it.
Thank you for the reminder to
Karen?
check WorldCat.
Karen, maybe
Yeah,
you could explain. Maybe you could explain what Biblio is and how it works. How do you get there?
So So Jane Friedman told me the steps, and I don't know, it's been a while since I've done it, to be quite frankly, but there are steps where you can get listed as an indie author within independent, it's like an independent author listing for libraries. And then it's like a small competition in the beginning. You're kind of competing for the book, but because you're in that competition, they then add your book to the ebooks that can be accepted by libraries and bought by libraries and distributed. I'll see if I can. I'm sure you're going to follow up with everybody in an email. I'll get the link together and send it to you for that. I did put it in there, and it has made me several dollars a month being inside of that library system. It's not. I don't think I'm doing it as well as Kris is. I mean, I would love steps that Kris takes to get into libraries, to get into Overdrive and Libby and things like that, because I don't think I'm doing it as well as I could be. So this is one of the great things about these panels is you get to learn.
Well, I didn't know about Biblio either, so I was taking notes as you were writing. It takes a while. Like I've noticed, it's kind of like watching water trickle because I can see what the sales are, and then I'll check and I'll say, like, well, there's only so many here, there's only so many there, not showing up here, but somebody told me they took it out there. So it's you have to be really patient. But the nice thing as an indie author, it's not like that when you're published traditionally. If you don't sell out within a certain amount of time, your publishers are going to drop you because you're your publisher, and you can always just keep focusing and working it. And it's kind of makes me feel less pressured. Yeah. So I know I'm going to be doing another push towards libraries. I only did, that's the other thing to consider. You can only do so much at a time. So you do a bit, then you think, okay, I'm going to work on other stuff. And when I get my energy back, I'll work on that. And it all like starts to bear fruit.
It does, yeah. So I found the link. So it's part of the Indie Author Project is what it's called. Biblio is part of that. And Biblio is basically the part that where you've uploaded your book and then they begin to pay you. But the Indie Author Project is what you have to join initially.
I see. Thank you.
I wanted to ask each of you also about the changes that have occurred in the publishing industry from the time you started publishing to current time. How have these changes, as ebooks have grown, as I mentioned, as audiobooks have grown, can you tell our audience how each of you have approached your marketing in different ways over time? What are some of the best practices that, if there is even one best practice that you could give our audience, what would that be?
So one thing that I'm really excited about that I've seen developing in the last couple of years here is the rise of subscription services. And I'm not just talking about like Scribd or Audible or whatever. I'm talking about subscription boxes and stuff, that sort of thing. My wife subscribed to this subscription box where she got a book and a bunch of themed gifts along with it. And I looked at that and I said, why can't I do that? Since I've got so many books and around the same time, I had a reader come to me and say, "You've got too many dang books. I can't buy them all at once. I wish you had something where I could just buy them once every month." I said, "Give me a minute." So I now have a book of the month club subscription that I offer, and you can get the ebook every month, or you can get the paperback, or you can get the collector's edition, which is hardcover that comes along with a gift and recipe cards and so forth, and map and all that stuff. I've got a pretty good base of recurring subscribers now who, every month I have to send them something out. And that means I've got to be on the ball in terms of getting my newsletter together. It's been a real driver for sort of imposing some structure on my business practices, as well as, this is now a built-in audience of people who I have a personal relationship with. Because I'm emailing them every month and saying, "Hey, your book's on its way, and here's why I wrote it." And so this small group of people is getting a much deeper experience with me than they would otherwise. Oh, the other thing with the collector's edition is I host a Zoom chat with those subscribers every month to talk about the. So it's building that relationship with the readers, and that to me is, I started publishing in, my first book came out in 2011, and I set up my own publishing house in 2013. So I've been doing this for a little bit over 10 years as an indie. When I first started, the big thing was selling in person, and I still do a lot of that. Of course, COVID interrupted that for a couple of years, which meant that I had to figure out how to do everything online. So now I'm doing, it's plus and I'm doing all the in-person stuff, and I'm doing the online stuff, and I'm trying out these new approaches to getting myself in front of readers and getting them excited about my books, and helping them to feel like they have a personal relationship with me as a human being, as well as doing my.
I just wanted to hop in on something Lars said about the direct sales. I held a Kickstarter for Natural Creatures, and I had a really, really great experience with it. I would definitely recommend Kickstarter if you have like a special edition, because you do build connections with people. And what shocked me was people round up what they pay. They're really, really generous. They're just excited to be supporting you directly. And plus, the other thing I think that we should be thinking about if you are an indie author is bundling things together. You could sell things in bundles, and that makes a big difference. That's something I'm looking to explore. That even though once I launched on Natural Creatures, I sort of focused more on let me let all these other things distribute it, whether it be Ingram or, or Kobo or Findaway. But I do want to set it up to do direct sales where I bundle things so that people will have a reason for purchasing directly from me. And you also make more money that way.
I wanted to ask Lars also, in terms of your discussion guides, how do you use them?
So that's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. I have a discussion guide that I've put together for each of the titles that I offer. I primarily put it together, first of all, for educators who wanted to incorporate my book into their programs. But the same questions apply pretty well for book clubs so that the groups to get together and drink wine and talk about books.
But do you put them online? How do you use them? You place them on your website?
Yeah, I have those all available on my website. And then, again, that's the basis of the monthly Zoom chat that I do with my readers. Is I say, okay, I sent you a copy of this, and these are the questions that we can start with, or we can talk about whatever you want to.
Very good.
Yeah, those and what those also force me to do is they force me to back off and try to discover what the themes are in my books, because I am a discovery writer, or as some people call it, a pantser. I don't plot everything out, and so I don't always know what the theme of my book is until I go back and reread it myself.
I think I'd just like to piggyback on what Kris and Lars and I have been kind of going over, or maybe sum up a little bit, and that there's a million things you can do to market a book. And it's really important that you find the things that you want to do, that you're comfortable doing, but that also really resonate with your readers. If you have a book that is conducive for book clubs like Lars or I do, then having discussion guides and having things that go with those books is really important. But if you have a book that is a fun historical romp and you just hope people will take it on vacation, then a book club is probably not going to be what you're going to go after. You only have so much time. Again, I keep going back to this, and you really want to spend it where it's going to be effective for you. So, whether or not you spend your time speaking with groups, or whether you market Facebook ads, or whether you do both of those things and also do book clubs, you have to really examine your audience and where they are hanging out, the types of materials they're used to seeing. I mean, if all of your particular audience is spending a lot more time on Instagram, you shouldn't be on Facebook. I never liked that advice of picking the social media you like the most and hanging out. No, it should be where your readers are hanging out. That's where they're going to spend their time.
But how do you find out where your readers are?
I say you stalk other authors that are like you. I mean, looking at where Lars is, as much as Lars and I share information about where our readers are, I like seeing where Lars's readers are, because that's probably where mine are too. I'm not going to go looking for someone that follows Philippa Gregory, because they're probably not going to be following me. I mean, that's just a different type of reader altogether. Same with Margaret Atwood. I mean, those, there's so many different genres within, or subgenres within historical fiction, that you really have to find your tribe and hang out with them. I'm not going to go to Renaissance fairs. It's not a good use of my time, even though they're historical readers. They're going to be looking for things that are related to the Renaissance. So, you got to be where your readers hang out the most. And it really is about stalking them online. I usually
I like that idea.
If you find another author that's like you online, go into their followers on Instagram and find out who they are. Are they the historical societies? Are they individual reenactors? Are they people who sew costumes for that particular time period? Those are the people that you want to follow and engage with. It is a little bit of sleuthing involved here.
The other thing I would say, I just want to add to what Karen said. In the survey that I sent out last month, I went to, a little bit of a long story here, but I went to an in-person event in October, anyway, and it was outdoors, which turned out to be a terrible, terrible, terrible idea in Oregon as winter is approaching. And unfortunately, we had a windstorm that day, which meant that some of my stock got damaged, including a full set of my books in hardcover. So I used that full set as an inducement to my newsletter subscribers and said, if you fill out the survey, I'll send you, I'll put you in the drawing for the full set. And I got a really good response rate. I'm going to say, around 4% of my readership actually responded to this survey. And one of the questions I asked is, where do you find authors like me and books like mine? And I got back some really good actionable data out of that. And again, it because I've done so much Facebook advertising, of course, it was weighted toward that. But a lot of people said that they actually, the majority of them said that they learn about books like mine and authors like me from newsletters. Oh, I need to do some more newsletter swaps.
It was a brilliant approach, Lars. We talked about it, but it does lead me to the point that, you got to find your Lars in the world, I mean, I'm so grateful that Lars is willing to email back and forth with me and share ideas and be open about his audience and who he's communicating with and vice versa. And we have a very big advantage in the Historical Novel Society in that you can find another author like you and you can do a lot of stuff together. The cooperative marketing we did a giveaway together and that really spiked all of our newsletter following when we all did that. Michael Ross was involved and Elizabeth Bell. I mean, a lot of us were in that, and it really does help to find your tribe in the Historical Novel Society too.
Which is a great idea. Anything from the chat that we should consider?
Yes, we've still got a couple of questions. Lars, Susan Wands wants to know, how often do you buy ads on Facebook, weekly or simply according to your budget?
So I have a regular ad that just runs permanently that I'm spending. Right now, I'm spending about $105 a week on it. And again, for every dollar that I send out, I'm over the long term, I'm bringing in $1.30, $1.40. I will say that right now, since probably about November, December, I'm seeing that drop off a little bit. Again, I monitor that stuff closely. So I'm probably going to be adjusting my approach there. But again, I'm probably going to spend about $15 a day on Facebook ads of one sort or another, just experimenting. And as long as I'm seeing $15 a day in sales, I'm happy. And when I see less than $15 a day in sales, I start to get a little bit nervous and start to think about changing things up. But the short answer is it's an ongoing, constant advertising campaign.
Okay, that's excellent. And also as a follow-up to all of you, Susan is also asking, how many of you are doing a monthly newsletter, or can you tell us exactly what is the frequency of your newsletter?
I send mine out about once a month, but it's usually, hey, I have news, but it'll be more frequent when I'm moving up to publication. I try not to send it just for the sake of sending it because I want people to feel that, oh, there's something important that I should be reading. And I do get a pretty good open rate. I mean, I usually get like close to 50% open rate, so that's good.
What about you, Karen?
So I have typically sent once a month. The last 6 months I have taken off because I really haven't had any news, kind of like what Kris was saying. But I've also had some family issues, but I also begged my newsletter subscribers to give me a break way back in August. So I feel like part of my newsletter group that I've built is a pretty loyal tribe. They stick around for a long time. I really monitor what my attrition rate is within my newsletter as I send newsletters out. Like Kris, I have a really good open rate. I'm pretty close to 50% as well. And that 50% is not always the same 50%, which is really great. So I feel like if I have a little break and come back, my attrition rate won't be high because I've built those followers off of all the talks I've done with the DAR and with groups that I've spoken to personally. So I know that I have a relationship with them for when I come back in that inbox. It's not, with few exceptions, my newsletter base is not people that have just signed up randomly. Most of them have known me or heard me speak. Let me try it again.
I do send out. Sorry, I do send out a monthly newsletter. My open rates are not quite as good as what you two are getting. I'm running between 35 to 40%. But I do send out monthly again because I do have that book of the month that I want to. Here's the book of the month that I want to talk about. I also include extracts from my what's happened in the American Revolution this month. And then another regular thing that I've been doing is over the last year, I've been donating all the proceeds from one of my books to Ukrainian relief. And so I talk about what's the Ukrainian relief organization that I'm donating to this month. I really want to be able to stop doing that, but continues.
Lars is a very good example of someone who has taken his brand and expanded it into his newsletter. mean, people are like, oh my gosh, I have a newsletter. What am I going to write about? We should be writing about things that are related to your brand. So he does good job about having, background information. He's really consistent in his social media in terms of showing events related to the revolution, and then those come into his email as well. But he's also very authentic, and that he, like when you lost your books during that windstorm, you were very frank in your newsletter about saying, like, I have damaged books that I'm willing to give away. And the fact that he had readers willing to sign up to take damaged books shows,
wonderful.
that authenticity really matters.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't make up stuff for your newsletter. You really make it match your brand and who you are as a person.
Very
And
nice. It's
that
very
makes it easy.
I didn't realize that an open rate of 50% of the newsletter is pretty good. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
This is wonderful to know. These are little details that I didn't know.
Yeah, most brands aim for 30 to 35. So anything over that, you're doing great.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm in that 30 to 35. Sometimes I'll edge up to 40.
You mentioned, yeah, interesting.
That is excellent. We've got one final question in the chat, which I think this is something that's definitely on my mind as well. How are you all using BookBub?
Oh, I love BookBub. I love BookBub. I've had really good experience with BookBub, but I've only done them for my traditionally published book. But you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can really apply. So since my book has only been out 3 months, it's too soon. But I've been really careful not to discount it for that reason, because one of the things that attracts BookBubs is first the reviews, secondly the fact that you're going to be giving them a really nice price drop and it's the first time. But yeah, BookBub is great. That's one of the few advertising platforms like newsletters and stuff where you really do get far more back than you put in. The other thing too is that I think a lot of times people become very intimidated by how expensive BookBub ads are, but bear in mind that a lot of times the particular category you sign up for won't be the one that they'll assign you. For example, whenever I've applied for BookBubs for my previous novel, A History of Dreams, I put it under historical fiction, which is like $2,000 for an ad, but they always said they felt it worked better as like mystery or supernatural suspense because it is a Gothic, which was considerably cheaper. It was like $900. And also the cost of the ad varies on how much you charge for your book. So if you're doing a giveaway or a 99-cent book, you're only spending a few $100s. So I really, really recommend it. They are very, very selective. So you have to think about getting those reviews and not discounting it until you're ready.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to use BookBub also. There's the featured placements, which is what Kris is talking about. They also have self-service ads that you can put in the BookBub newsletters. And those are very complex. And I don't know very many people who have cracked the code on that. The last category that they have though is the featured new release, and that's a lot less selective in my experience. That I think costs about $1,000. And I did that not with my most recent release, but the one before. And I was very hopeful that I was going to get a huge response out of it. And looking back, I should have been really happy with the response I did get because it did pay for itself over the, and looking at the difference in my sales over the entire series versus what it was without it, it did pay off relatively quickly. So the featured new releases is an option that I would definitely recommend anybody to look at.
And I've never run a BookBub ad or done anything with them at all. And part of that is because of where I find my joy a little bit is in the public speaking and in the speaking with historical groups. So I mean that's where I've spent the majority of my time and my money. When I look at spending $900 or $1,000 or $2,000, I want to make sure that I'm spending it somewhere where my joy is. So up to this point, I have not been paid for speaking engagements. Well, not up to this point, but the first couple of years, I was not really paid for speaking engagements. And now I'm at the point where I'm being paid for speaking engagements. So it's, that investment of my money was there rather than in BookBub. Because I just figured my audience, my Revolutionary War sisters, were probably not going to be spending a ton of time in BookBub. But, that doesn't mean I wouldn't love to learn from Lars and Kris about how to do that better, because every avenue is an avenue to get more books read.
Mhm.
I've only gotten one BookBub feature release, and that was years and years ago, back when it was not quite as today.
Yeah, they love box sets. Maybe you should do that now, Lars.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking, as I'm finishing out regions, I'm thinking about putting together a box set of the New England states or colonies, and offering that as a box set, which I can't price it appropriately on Amazon, because they will not pay the same royalty rates if you go above $10. And for 6 or 7 books, $10 is just too cheap. But put it everywhere but Amazon, and then offer it as a BookBub, and maybe I get somewhere.
We have been here for an hour and 15 minutes, or an hour and 10 minutes, but we can't go until I ask Kris one last question. I have one question for her that I have to get off my chest.
Uh-oh. Should I be nervous that you need to get it off your chest?
No.
Okay.
No, I find very interesting this duality between being an artist and at the same time being an author. And I was reading on your website about these consultations that you do for you do tarot consultations. So I have a question that is basically 2 questions. When people come to you for these tarot readings, have they read your books? That's the first question.
Usually they have, or they've taken a class with me. And to say it's tarot consultation, it's more like, I'm sure anybody who's a published author gets the, can I pick your brain and take you out to coffee and all of that? And so it was a way for me to set a professional boundary, because my information is valuable. But I also, because I am a professional tarot reader, which is part of my brand, if you will, so there's a little bit of overlap where we'll talk, I'll give you information, I'll pull a few cards as we need, we'll have a conversation, and it works really well. And I have had some authors who have been, and writers and creatives who've been coming to me on and off for a few years, and I love seeing their careers progress, and it's very satisfying.
Interesting. And the other question is, you have these tarot cards, but you have 3 sets of tarot cards, and I am just curious.
Actually,
Why
2 sets of tarot cards. Actually, there's
So-
2 sets of tarot cards and several oracle decks, because while tarot cards are oracle cards, not all oracle cards are tarot cards. There are 2 different tarot decks, because the first is the Goddess Tarot, which is more oriented around creative problem solving and that sort of thing. The second one is called the Lover's Path Tarot, and it was tied into another book that I had created called The Lover's Path. And that's all about love myths, because one of the most popular questions that you get when you read tarot are about relationships. It's always interesting because I can tell what's going on in the world depending on the questions people ask me. And I get a lot of people coming to ask me about financial stuff. I know the economy's in trouble. People are asking me about relationships. I know things are settled.
Interesting. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, there are no more questions in the chat. So I want to thank all of you in our audience for joining us. I especially want to thank Karen, Lars, and Kris for making yourselves available this evening. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you at another Historical Novel Society chapter event.
And that concludes our program. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. You can find out more about the New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society and our leadership at our website, or contact us at hns-nyc@mail.com. And finally, please consider supporting our volunteer panelists and hosts. You can contact them at their websites below. Thanks for joining us.